Okay, so I'm just going to start looking at the knowledge questions after I've done that little intro. And these, part one of the knowledge questions focuses on access, equity and human rights. Quiz. So question one, housing is considered a fundamental human right, both internationally and in Australia. Why is this the case? With a question mark. Choose the answer that best describes the reasons why it is the case. Just have a look at my slide. So human rights, there isn't an Australian specific law relating to housing as a basic human right. You should be aware that Australian organisations are subject to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights by the United Nations, and that says that people need to be afforded security of tenure, so place to live, have all the services and infrastructure needed. It needs to be affordable, accessible, livable, we'll call it habitable, locations in, considerable and culturally appropriate. All those considerations come from that Declaration of Human Rights. And I've just moved on to this next slide. So it's saying that the Declaration says everyone has a right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of them and their family, including food, clothing, housing and medical care and necessary social services, and the right to security in the event of unemployment, sickness, disability, widowhood, old age or lack of livelihood. So we've got an Australian Human Rights Commission. Let's have a look at what they saw, what their relationship with housing is. So they're saying that people experience homelessness face violations of a wide range of human rights. So it's a basic human right. Homelessness is not just about housing. So yeah, they may be at risk, of accessing a standard of living, obviously, but education, security, privacy, social security even, they may be discriminated against. And we also have the International Human Rights of the Convention of the Child that we, are signatory to in Australia, so that protects the rights of children. So just looking at this first question. So A, saying that housing that is affordable at 50% of your income level or less is fundamentally important. So yeah, that makes sense. And we certainly hear those arguments about what proportion of a person's income should they be paying on housing. And we certainly know the private rental market is astronomical and would be reaching that 50% mark for many people, particularly if you're on some sort of government payment, but other, low-paying jobs. Yeah, we all know that the rental market is high, the cost is high. It says housing gives shelter, which is a fundamental to human survival. Well, that makes sense. A choice of housing such as home ownership is essential for stability and security. So having a choice of housing, whether it's home ownership or rental or something appropriate, that certainly does help stability and security. So C makes sense. I guess, I'm just going through this because, look, I'll tell you what the provided answers are, but housing provides a means for multiple other human rights to be met, including the right to dignity and privacy for self and family. So I guess they're saying, and I think I covered that in my slides, that yeah, once you've got secure housing, the whole range of, social inclusion, social well-being falls into place. So D is the provided answer, as well as A, that 50% mark is crucial. So not paying more than 50% of your income on housing is important. So just to interpret that first one, I found that worded slightly confusing in some ways. Question 2, which of the following statements indicate the ways in which homelessness can impact on human rights? True and false for these. So a person may be exposed to further human rights violations when homeless, which lead to cumulative trauma. So basically, yeah, if you're homeless, you can be exposed to other violations of your human rights, and we've mentioned things like being at risk of violence or rape as an example. So the answer is true on that one for sure. The person may not like housing choices or styles available to them. So that's false. It's nothing to do with the styles and choices. C, the person or family may have to live in temporary or transient housing which is unstable. And we have spoken about that. People escaping domestic violence, or they're homeless, young people who might be homeless, may end up in a boarding house or a caravan park. So that is unstable, or it could be transient. Couch surfing, another transient type option. And so the answer is true. And D, rough sleeping, homeless, or persons living in their car may face lack of adequate water or sanitation. Answer is true. And we did speak about our local service, Our Backyard, which tries to address that by providing those amenities while people continue to live in their car. And they do get support while they're accessing that service, living in their car. Number 3, how would you describe an access and equity issue for people who are homeless or at risk of homelessness? Access and equity issue. Choose 2 answers that best demonstrate this concept. Access and equity. So just a little bit about access and equity. Access and equity principles relate to ensuring that all clients, regardless of their backgrounds, culture, gender or ability, enjoy full access to services. Doesn't matter if you're using a wheelchair, you still need to be able to have access and equity. So that's that idea, regardless of those diverse groups. So let's have a look. There's 2 answers here. So how would you describe an access and equity issue? Demand for crisis services outstrips supply. Well, that's true. I don't know if that's going to fit into access and equity. There are no notifications for disability access at access points for service, for example, a ramp or wider doorway. So there we go. That one is it. One of them. The long waiting list for services. So that's true, and that impacts everyone. So we're thinking more about that diversity in this question. So D, the service operates in a multicultural area. However, material is provided in English only and staff are all English speaking. So that's the other one. So B and D. Yeah, people are disadvantaged. They cannot access a service because of that language barrier there. Question 4, how does prioritising access to medium or longer term social housing try to address inequity, for example by prioritising older people with health issues or persons with complex histories of homelessness? Choose 2 responses. So we spoke about that social housing, so that's housing that's affordable, could be government provided through Department of Housing, but we also mentioned Hume or Compass out there in that space trying to provide accessible housing. So they're saying A, by weighting known areas of inequity by points, for example, significant health issues. So there must be a point system to make, prioritise people, whether, disability, disadvantage, etc. So point system, and so that's the provided answer. By informing people of the criteria so they can try to meet them, that's not one. But by providing a structured and transparent process of addressing equity and access across the whole housing system is the other one. It's not D. 5, unregulated tenant databases run by private providers are often used to assess tenant suitability for rental in the private market. Entry on a database can mean no tenancy is offered. How could this structural issue impact housing access and maintain homelessness? Choose 2 responses. So I guess what they're saying here, private rentals, they do have some sort of assessment criteria and a database. They can make notes and entries and blacklist people perhaps. So if they're saying here, people who have experienced periodic disadvantage which impacted their capacity to pay rent may find themselves unable to gain a new tenancy and access issues. So that's a provided answer. So for some reason you've come up on these private rental market databases and you could be, as I said, black banned based on some other disadvantage that you might have experienced previously. And the other one that we'll look at is C. So being listed on a database by past behaviour may exclude from future access, meaning human rights to housing is affected. Yeah, so if someone's put a line through you based on some other behaviour in the past, is that really meeting our human rights obligations to provide people access? All right, I'm going to leave it there. That's got through part 1.